Good morning, good morning, good morning. How about that for a start to your morning, huh? Wow, I wrote down every note I could write down until I just couldn't write anymore. Bishop T.D. Jakes getting us ready for why we are here this final day of the big day 3 of the Hope Global Forum. Give yourselves a round of applause. This is amazing. In 2020, Operation Hope launched a bold 10-year initiative for financial literacy for everyone. Co-chaired by Walmart CEO Doug McMillon, a number of high-profile CEOs and organizations joined up right out of the gate, a number that has actually grown to over 50 of the most influential organizations, not in the state, not in the U.S., but in the world. So we're very fortunate. This is something, I don't know where you can go that you can experience something like this, be this close, up close and personal with these CEOs. But right now, you're about to have some of the founding members with us today to tell us just why financial literacy is so important for all of America's future and how you can help be a part of this. So are you ready for this? Welcome to the stage, and we want you to welcome them. It's morning. Come on, let's show us what you got. Show in Atlanta, welcome to the president and CEO of PayPal, Dan Schulman. I know you all use PayPal. The executive chair and co-founder of Ares Management and principal owner of the Atlanta Hawks, Tony Ressler. The president and CEO of Walmart, Doug McMillon. And Operation Hope CEO, John Hope Bryant. Enjoy.
So I've done this twice this last 3 days, but this was not my doing this time. Bishop T.D. Jakes and I, in the back, really him, raised his hand on my 3 friends here to my right and said, "We now, by the authority vested in the universe, proclaim you 3 honorary black men."
I've been called worse.
But not much better. I don't know if you get this. This is unprecedented. That gentleman there is the CEO of one of the most important payment systems in the world, PayPal. Dan and I had a conversation where he was going to donate. He was so upset about George Floyd and what happened, he was going to donate $50 million of personal wealth. And I said, don't do that, because if you do that and you unfortunately pass away tomorrow, now you got people hooked on your philanthropy, and you may not be followed by a CEO after you at PayPal who gives a dang. And now we have an expectation that's going to be met with a letdown. Why don't you figure out a way to bake this in your business? I walked away. I hear within 6 months, he's announced a $500 million initiative at PayPal to reinvest in communities, reinvest in his employees, reinvest in black business. $500 million. And then he got upset with me when he heard that Doug and I were launching with Tony Ressler, Financial Literacy for All, and said, "Why didn't you ask me to be part of the founding group? You must backdate the documents to make me part of the founding group." I like that kind of energy. And actually, as I look at you, Dan, as tan as you are, you actually might pass for black, actually. And those cowboy boots is a whole nother situation. Yeah. And next to Dan, he hates when I say this, but I don't care. The 275th wealthiest man in the world.
That's not too shabby.
up from nothing. Nobody gave him a spoon. Nobody gave him a trust fund. Nobody hooked him up. This man, someone was in the water in the Ressler household because him and his brother just came out the blocks in two different directions and killed it. This man has built Apollo and built Ares Management, which I think is now approaching $400 billion in assets under management, owns the Atlanta Hawks, principal on the Atlanta Hawks, has an interest in the F1 team, baseball team, all that. But most notably, when no one's watching, his obsession is building black businesses. Tony Ressler. Full transparency, when I had a vision for a business, and I know a lot of people, there's only one person I talk to, or two, Michael Arrighetti and Tony Ressler. And the guy who backed my business, I'm glad to say I paid him off. I love that, I paid him off. The guy who backed my business was Tony Ressler. The guy who helped Killer Mike when he needed it was Tony Ressler. The guy who helped, there's a lot of people you see visibly. You don't realize behind that is somebody else providing support. Not a handout, a hand. And he and his brother are now made the largest investment in Atlanta since Atlanta. It's called Centennial Yards, $6 billion, right across from Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where 30 to 40% of all vendors will be a minority and women by written agreement with the city and the state. That's the kind of man you have sitting in front of you there. And probably the most powerful quiet storm I know in my life is Doug McMillon. Doug doesn't scream, he doesn't holler. He may look to you dressed down. I mean, there's probably some Walmart clothes he's got on there. I'm feeling it.
I didn't get the note on the shoes, though.
It's okay, you got the note on the wealth. Doug McMillon is the CEO, I'm gonna say this slowly. He's the CEO of the #1 Fortune 500 company in the world, Walmart. Came up through the system. Weren't you like a
Started out in a warehouse unloading trucks.
Did you hear that?
Pretty amazing.
Loading trucks. I'm sure he was dismissed. I'm sure that he was discarded. I'm sure that people were disrespected him who now report to him. Always gracious, humble, and approachable. And I knew I liked you from the first day we met. And one day, it was around Christmas, 2 years ago, I believe, Shatra and I were on a retreat, and I had a vision. I had an idea, and I called Doug. I texted him. I said, can I talk to you? He said, sure. No secretaries, no scheduling out 3 months, no protocol. Can I talk to you? Sure. He called me. This is now basically Christmas. He's people with their families. He calls me. What's up? I said, I've got this idea. I think financial literacy should be the civil rights issue of this generation. I waited for the response or the click. He said, I agree. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? I said, I didn't have an answer to that. I don't know, Doug. I just called you with this idea. And he said, well, we need to do something about it. How do we operationalize this? Well, we should put together an initiative, maybe a coalition of the willing. And by the way, this idea of financial literacy also, by the way, came from Tony Ressler and another friend of mine, Andrew Ross Sorkin, who's on Squawk Box, who told me years ago that we needed to make this a centerpiece of everything we do. So I called Doug, and Doug said, well, hold on. We need to get a creative company. So he called Disney. I'm sorry, while I'm sitting there, I'm on the phone with him. He's texting, yes. Then he says, well, hold on, we need a banker. So then he texts the CEO of Bank of America, Brian. Brian says, yes. I text Tony Ressler. I said, Tony, I need you to say yes. He's got 2 yeses. Tony's like, I don't know what you're calling me about, but sure, yes. And Yes, Dan, in my mind, I texted you. Yes. But I'd already asked you for some other stuff, by the way. And within 15 minutes, we had a coalition. And then about a week later, Doug said, we get this thing bogged down with our teams. It's going to take 6, 12 months or more to get this thing done. He said, why don't we just draft up a press release and issue it? And I said, okay, who's going to draft it? He said, I'll draft it. So he went, he's the CEO of Walmart. He goes to his little iPad. He drafts up a press release. We're going to launch Financial Literacy for All. These CEOs, he's going to launch on whatever it was, like a date, like a week before. He said, we're going to call these CEOs, get them to say yes, give them a day to say yes to the press release so they can't think about it too long. And then we're going to issue it. And then everybody's committed. That's what happened. He dropped the press release. And now we have 50 of the Fortune 200 CEOs in America in a year committed to Financial Literacy for All, this NBA commissioner, the NFL commissioner, the head of Wells Fargo, the head of Bank of America, the head of Nestle, this list is unbelievable. Yes, the head of PayPal, and it's growing and pulsating. And our commitment now is we want CEOs to treat this like healthcare was 40 years ago. We want to embed this into the business plan of every corporation in America. We want them to do it for 10 years, resource it appropriately, make it part of their culture, and take it seriously. We're not prescriptive. We're not telling you how to do it. And again, I learned this from Doug. Don't micromanage these CEOs. They're good at achievement. And our goal is to do that and also to get some public policy so that by the time your kids grow up, that financial literacy is in schools, K through college, as a requirement so that everybody learns the language of money. This is the backstory you never hear. Will you join me in saying thank you to this group of people? So Doug, you understand Up From Nothing. It's your story. You understand, you're running Walmart. It's like running the biggest, it's like running a country. It's 2 million employees almost. How many customers?
In the U.S., 160 million a week.
Just crazy.
Can you run that by me one more time? You see how cool he was about that? No screaming, no hollering. You got to whisper. Repeat that.
160 million a week.
Woo! And how many around the world?
240.
240 what?
240 million a week around the world.
I think the biggest mistake we made, my mother made some handicraft, and when I was coming up, my sister tells me that she had a chance, Walmart asked her, get an offer to put her product in a Walmart store, and they only offered her like 2 pennies on each sale, and she turned her nose up on it. We could be loaded. Mom, where are you? What were you thinking?
Still time.
Still time. So you are, I want to get into some of the stuff you're doing to operationalize opportunity, all of you, within your respective enterprises. But when you think about this issue, how does it relate to, financial literacy, does that relate to Walmart and its businesses? In what way? What's the connection?
Yeah, let me start with just saying that I think, John, you represent the most important voice in the country on this issue. And this is of strategic significance to our country, and I appreciate the role that you play in that process.
Yeah.
You are
hard to hear.
You're educating people, and you're relentless, and I admire that about you. In terms of our responsibility, we've got 2.3 million associates around the world, and we start out thinking about what do they make? What's their pay? I started at $6.50 an hour. Our wages have been going up. We want to keep raising our wages. That's foundational. Secondarily, what kind of cash bonus do they get? Many of our jobs pay a cash bonus. Then what does healthcare look like? Then there's a 401k. Then there's a share repurchase plan. Then there's Live Better You, where we pay for education for people to get a college degree, and 75,000 people have enrolled, 11,000 people graduated so far. So there's a whole system of things, but our associates frequently don't even know about them. They're coming to work, they're doing their job, they're going home. For whatever reason, our communication is not working as well as we would like for it to work. And at the end of the day, what we want is to create opportunity. Bishop Jakes was talking about give us an opportunity. 75% of our management team started as hourly. The guy that leads our Walmart U.S. business now, John Ferner, started out working in lawn and garden. The guy that leads all of our stores, Dakota Smith, started assembling bikes. It's opportunity. So it's not where you start, it's where you finish and how you go through the system. But as you go, you need to save some money. You need to understand what interest rates do to savings. You need to understand what the tools are. You need to know the rules of the game.
Yeah.
And so we want to invest all this money in our folks, but we want them to do well, have a retirement that is something worth looking forward to. And so this is really important to us. And what happened when you and I got engaged is what happened, I think, with a lot of these CEOs is we said, yeah, we have a program where we teach financial education and wellness, but it's just one thing that we do out of so many, and we're not as effective. So we have dialed it up since you and I started spending time together, and I think that's what Financial Literacy for All has done, is now you've got all these leaders that are accountable for making sure that not only do you have the right tools, but you also are communicating effectively and getting more people to use them.
And you and I have committed, well, really, you've inspired me to say we should try to get 80% of the Fortune 500 involved with this in the next couple of years, committed to it. So the goal that he set, and now that we set as co-chairs, is very, very high. And we hope to do with this what really Dan Schulman inspired after George Floyd's murder. With, I think that $62 billion in corporate commitments was in large part inspired by the Dan Schulmans of the world who made early commitments, and Ed Bastian, who was here yesterday, and other CEO role models who are showing that you can have social justice through an economic lens. And even inside your company, you're showing that financial literacy can lead to other things. This whole issue of financial competency and economic opportunity is broad-based, is what I meant to say, like what you did with Roz Brewer. Mm-hmm. So tell the audience, it may not be obvious, where did Roz start at, where did she go, and where's she at now?
Roz is an engineer by training, chemical engineer by training, and she was part of our company, worked in our Walmart U.S. business, got promoted to lead Sam's Club, and she's currently the CEO of Walgreens. I think there's something like 25 to 30 current CEOs that came through Walmart with part of their career, which is great. We've got big jobs, and people learn a lot, and then they go on to do other things, and so it forms a bit of a community where we can help each other.
But what he didn't tell you is that Roz Brewer is a sister. There's a powerful black woman who had all the talent in the world, but if it wasn't for a fair-minded person who used to stock shelves, who saw somebody with talent and gave them a shot, then the doors wouldn't be open. This is the same thing with the T.D. Jakes and I were talking about. We need the James Brown version of affirmative action. Open the door, I'll get it myself. But we need somebody to open the door. You have been a door opener for so many people, and I want to thank you for your kind of leadership. And now on this topic. Tony, why did you think this issue was so important? Why'd you keep nailing me on it and hammering me to focus on this? You focus on your players at the Hawks to focus on not just making money, but building wealth, and to use these contracts, these once-in-a-lifetime contracts, to actually have wealth, sustainable wealth-creating opportunities. You almost get angry, about waste of these opportunities. It seems to be in your bones. Why did you press me so much? Why is this issue so important to you?
Well, again, having the private sector lead by example, I will say just a statement of the obvious. If you do want to create a remarkable organization, you do want the Fortune 50 or the Fortune 100 to say yes, I would urge you to have Doug McMillon and John Bryant call the CEOs of these various institutions, which is a pretty remarkable response in itself. But please understand, if you want to create wealth in this country, or you want to even the playing field, if you think about it, take a step back. You want to find a good job, you want to buy a home, or you want to build a business. Any of those endeavors requires basic financial literacy. And the vast majority of kids coming out of high school don't have it. So the ability for the private sector to lead by example, to highlight the importance of financial literacy, to actually institute methods by which people can create access, really for free, basic financial literacy, is, as Bishop Jakes said, it can be transformational, not just inspirational. And to me, that is so important for people that can to have that kind of influence. And yes, do you get frustrated? Again, I don't want to use individual examples, but whether you're making $25,000 a year, or as we see in a whole lot of parts of the world, $25 million a year in certain sports businesses or entertainment businesses. These are people with extraordinary access to wealth, extraordinary wealth, but not with basic financial literacy. And the folks sometimes, and I would argue in the professional sports business, they don't just make very, very good incomes, which they do, of course, but they should be positioned to be the business leaders, if you will, or moguls of their communities when they're done playing. And with basic financial literacy, that happens. So I don't get angry. I just find it a bit of an obsession for me, which is for things that people can actually impact. I think the private sector, with something along the lines of financial literacy for all, can really have this enormous impact and should. And to me, that's the private sector leading by example. And I couldn't be more proud to be part of it.
What was in the water at the Ressler House? You and Richard, yes, you're simpatico, but you went in two different directions. Both of you are now these outsized success. Was financial literacy part of the formula that was in the water in the Ressler household? Did somebody teach you about how money worked? Was somebody reading the Wall Street Journal? I mean, where did that understanding of how markets and money come from?
I don't have a good answer. There was no, I didn't grow up the way I live. I just thought, and frankly, growing up, I did think anything was possible, but I had no financial background. I had no basic financial literacy at the time, but I did have access to a decent public education. And for that, I thought anything was possible. But again, to what helped me create success, I have no idea. It's sometimes being lucky, sometimes being in the right place at the right time. But I do know the position I'm in now and the ability to help, if you will, level the playing field for most. Maybe it's not possible for all, but it is possible for most. And we've got to do something. And it's not, maybe it's a whole bunch of things, actually. But I really do believe financial literacy, accessing financial literacy, is one of those core foundations that can change that playing field.
So I know something is similar about all three of your stories. All three of you came from very humble beginnings. No one gave you anything other than you had the privilege of having a different hue than I have, which you all have acknowledged is an advantage. But you do understand what it's like to not have that credibility and that moniker that just gives you success. So I think that's part of the reason why you care so much for others. Dan, I met your mother. Your mother in the 1960s refused to buy a house that had a covenant in it restricting ownership from a black. Your mother was a civil rights advocate. You were on the March on Washington as a child, looking at Andrew Young and Dr. King. These are things that people don't know about your story that I think root you in some fundamental values. Why do you care so much? And why did you what happened in the chemistry in your head when we had that conversation? Clearly it was your doing. You went on with friends and others and created this program that actually has sustainable legs. How does it relate to financial literacy for all? And what's the result so far?
Well, just one quick thing. John, I want to thank you for your friendship and all your support as well. And your advice and counsel has helped shape kind of the policies that we've had at PayPal. So thank you for that. My mom was a civil rights activist. My dad was worried I'd be the youngest kid to have his picture in an FBI file. So he really did not like me being pushed in my carriage at all these civil rights marches. But one thing, that my parents taught me, and it's kind of upstream, I think, to financial literacy, is so many people in our country struggle. They struggle to make ends meet. It's actually unbelievable. It's 70% of adults in the US struggle to pay their bills at the end of the month. They're juggling. What do? Do they put food on the table? What bills do they pay? Do they get health care benefits or not? It's a real massive issue in our country. People are financially stressed. They leave their jobs. There's absenteeism. They radicalize because they don't think that the system is working for them. And so, my view on this is that as great a system as we have in our country, capitalism, it doesn't work for all parts of the population. There's so many people being left behind.
Yep.
And so you can't really depend on the market to figure out, like, are people being paid a fair wage or not? Doug has been a leader in this. Tony talked about this, but, I did a survey of our employees because I thought, well, PayPal, we're a tech company. We pay at or above market for all of our employees, that they would not be financially stressed. And what I found is that over 50% of our employees had only between 4 and 6% of their income available to them after they paid their taxes and essential living expenses. So they were stressed, and we put in place a whole program to take that 4 to 6% up to at least 18 to 20% of their net disposable income. We increased their salaries. We decreased the cost of healthcare by 65% for that employee base.
65%? Wow.
And we gave everybody in the company equity in the company. We gave them all stock, every single person. So, and then we wrapped it all in a financial education program, to your point about financial literacy, because this is the first time people actually had savings. It's the first time they had equity. It's the first time that they could actually figure out what kind of benefit package they wanted for their family. First time they could avail themselves of 401k plans. And so the financial education part of this was crucial. And what we found, even though it costs us hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to put this in place, different than the $500 million.
On top of
it, is what we found is that attrition dropped by something like 60%. Our training costs went way down because we weren't replacing people. People weren't stressed at the job, so their engagement scores went up. Our customer satisfaction scores went up. And for me, this investment in our people was as important, probably well more important than any investment we could make in marketing or R&D, because the most important asset that we manage up here is our employees.
Yep.
It is the most important asset we have.
Well, and Dan, you're making a point that I want to make sure everybody gets here in this audience. These folks here are not talking about charity. They're talking about enlightened self-interest. They're good people. But correct me if I'm wrong, you need your employees and your customers and your communities to be financially literate in order to have sustained success.
Yes, true.
True?
No doubt.
True?
Completely obvious.
Well, it's not obvious if you're a predator. So if the old model is you have a check casher next to a payday loan lender, next to a rent-to-own store, next to a title lender, next to a pawn shop, that's preying on a 500 credit score neighborhood, whether it's black and brown, urban, or white, rural. That model, in my opinion, should die. And we found, go ahead, Dan.
It's ridiculous.
It's a conversation, go ahead.
It's ridiculous to think that corporations are an island unto themselves. We operate in our communities. Our employees are part of our communities. We operate in a bigger economy. if it isn't working for everybody, that sub-optimizes business as well. This whole idea of profit and purpose being at odds with each other is ridiculous.
That's it.
Right? They actually work hand in hand with each other. If we have a purpose, if we are satisfying multiple constituencies, our businesses are stronger as a result. And so this idea of people coming after companies because they have purpose or they have a sense of values about them, it's ridiculous. That is suboptimal.
So to build on that, it's actually statistically true that companies that are more diverse and inclusive are more profitable.
Yep.
It's also true that regions of the country that are more diverse are more profitable. Atlanta is the biggest economy in the South, the only international city in the South, and the 10th largest economy in the country. It's also the most diverse place in the South. And wherever you find diversity and inclusion in a business or an enterprise, it's actually good business. You can do well and do good at the same time. That's what I hear you saying.
It's the only way to do it over time.
The only way to do it.
Only way to do it over time, and we are trying to build things that last beyond us and last for generations. Walmart's 60 years old, and we would like to be here in another 60 years and beyond. And the only way to do that is if it is a participative, inclusive process where everybody can win. So we're systems designers trying to figure out how do you put all the pieces in place so that everyone has the opportunity so this thing lasts forever and everybody benefits. And that is a perpetual, ongoing, terrific challenge to try and solve.
Yes, and this has to be, Doug, this has to be, yes, black and brown urban, yes, but it also has to be poor white rural because they're dealing with the exact same issue. A 500 credit score neighborhood is where all your murders, all your drug issues, your depression issues, your single parent households, your lower education levels. By the way, somebody living in a 500 credit score neighborhood lives to 61. Somebody in a 700 credit score neighborhood lives to 81. This is nationwide. You get 20 more years of life because of your zip code and your credit score. I think nothing changes your life more than God or love, possibly, than moving your credit score 120 points. If you can move a credit score from 500 to 710, not only do you stabilize the community, you create GDP, you keep optimistic people, you create two-parent households, people become obsessed with hustle and opportunity and create something happens to the endorphins in their head. That's our community credit score index that we created that's mapped every community out by zip code and credit score. And as I look now at how you guys are running your business, the reason I said to you, Dan, you can't just make this contribution was because it would be episodic. You make the contribution, then you leave or whatever it happens, and the next guy or woman that comes in, they're not going to do, here's $50 million of my own money. That's just not happening.
But as Doug is saying, as Dan has said, this is both good business and good for the community.
Yes.
They actually work together. I mean, at the Atlanta Hawks,
yeah.
I'm just saying, it's a community asset. You own a professional sports team, that's a community asset. But it just so happens we were in the middle of COVID, we had an empty arena, and we had real problems in this city about the ability to vote. And for certain parts of this city, it was taking 3- and 4-hour waits for people to cast their vote.
Yeah.
That's bad. That's bad for America. That's bad for the city of Atlanta.
That's right.
And I must say, we offered 350 of our full-time employees to be full-time helpers in the vote, in the election process. We reduced that 3-hour wait to 20 minutes. But I'm sorry, I'm not trying to brag. I'm saying that our employee base was thrilled to do it. We didn't have a single employee reject. They were working 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for 3 weeks prior to the election.
Yeah.
They weren't forced to do that.
Yeah.
They weren't paid to do that. They were already being paid,
right.
But that was additional time on their part. All I'm saying is that's good business. And it helped our business enormously by being a better member of the community.
Yep.
That's just an example, and I assure you, Walmart being a good member of the community, PayPal being a good member of the community is both good business and I would hope the future of our private sector. That's something that the U.S. will benefit from and is starting to, and the simple answer is how do we make it more common?
and embed it. That's why you three are on the stage, is I think you're role models for other corporate leaders. And I think I want to leave with recommendations or advice you have for corporate leaders and business leaders. But before we get that, we've had these powerful examples, Dan, from you and you also, Tony, about how you're operationalizing this beyond just a concept of financial literacy to inclusion and how that's good for your business. And again, Doug, it's not enough to say, well, I was a box boy, I made it. You have done things to embed this. You have increased the wage level. You have given the opportunity for education paid for by Walmart, as I understand it. Is that right?
Correct.
I see this as the same narrative. This is a couple of things that I'm saying. You're trying to embed this, so Walmart's a good place to work, not to survive, but to actually thrive. Mm-hmm. And what you've done is, what we've done with Financial Literacy for All, I've been told, is inspired Truist CEO to give every one of their employees financial literacy plus a $750 check for a savings account. Ed just announced it yesterday that January he's going to do $1,000 for every employee who goes through financial literacy at Delta nationwide for his 90,000 employees. How does this operationalize for you at Walmart? Give us a quick sense of what you're doing there.
Yeah, well, I think education is one component, but the other one's tools. Yep. So we found a product called Even, where associates can basically pull forward their compensation if they need to. So they don't have to borrow money, and they've had, since we put the program in place in 2018, hundreds of millions of dollars of savings that didn't go to bank fees that our associates have been able to keep. That same tool helps them be able to save money and put over $300 million aside for savings since we put that in place in 2018. So it's got to be done in a way that
Repeat that what you just said now? How many?
Our associates since 2018 have put away $300 million in savings because they've got a simple tool that their paycheck goes into, that they can say, I want to set a little bit aside. You were talking earlier about why we are the way we are. In my case, my dad burned into my head as a dentist and a small business owner, because that's what my mom and dad did, save 10%. Mm-hmm. I don't care if you're making $10 an hour or $6.50 an hour, I want you to pay your taxes, put 10% aside. Yep. And my grandfather taught to me about time value money and compound interest. Yep. But a lot of people don't understand that regardless of how much you make, you can be a Walmart truck driver making $110,000 a year and still not manage your money well.
Wait, repeat what you just said?
A truck
driver a Walmart truck driver and do what?
Make $110,000 a year.
Somebody needs to put your suit up and go find some overalls. $110,000 a year?
But regardless of how much you make, you can still mess it up if you don't understand how to do it, and it's not put into like your fingertips to make it easy. Yeah. So again, back to design, we're trying to make it easy for people to understand and to save a little bit or save a lot so that over time you end up with comfort and you don't have all this stress. Financial stress for families is a big deal. It creates divorce. It creates all this other pain. And that's why this is such a foundational issue.
And that's not good for business. Stress.
It's not good for retention.
Yeah.
If you don't have a happy associate, you don't have a happy customer, it all works together.
Corporate America could be part of the problem, or it could lead to many of the solutions.
That's right. And just like in the 1960s, where it was businesses that integrated the South. I don't know if you know that. It was not government. Government was standing in the hallway saying, over my dead body, will you integrate, will you come into school? It was actually Andrew Young, sent by Dr. King, quietly to talk to 100 business leaders in every little town and ask them to take down the whites only sign. And they did it because it was bad for business. Because the customer was black, yes, but the color of the currency was green. And they weren't going in the stores anymore. And so they took down the whites only signs at Woolworths and JCPenney and all those stores, and that's how the South. And then they went to the mayor, the business leaders went to the mayor and told them to knock it off in their little town, and that's how the South got integrated. That was stopping a negative. What I see, what you guys are trying to do, is to start a positive, at scale, embedded into the business plan of America. Each one of you, as a close, what advice do you have to the CEO that's watching this, the leader that's watching this, the C-suite, of how you can do well and do good too?
Go ahead, Doug.
I would just say you have to be personally involved. This is one of those issues that if leaders are not seeking to understand, looking at kind of the detail of how this all works, nothing will happen. And in bigger companies, if you take your eye off of it, it drifts down and something else gets everyone's attention. So my advice would be get personally involved and stay involved.
And by the way, each one of these gentlemen do that because we're emailing, texting. Yes, Julie, you're on your team, and all the other team members, I want to give them, we can't do anything without our teams. But Doug is personally sending notes and personally making phone calls. All three of these gentlemen do that same thing. Tony?
Well, I generally just would agree with whatever the head of Walmart would say, actually. No. I would say this, which you got to be careful, but it's back to your earlier point. I actually believe every CEO in America should have a plan, and preferably a 10-year plan.
That's right.
On how to have a more financially competent workforce, which is good for their workforce long-term and short-term for that matter, and how to become more diverse, again, with a 10-year plan to do it properly, because it's both good for the community, good for the country, but good for the business.
Yeah, I got my 10-year idea from you, by the way. Dan?
Well, I just don't think that we as CEOs can leave all the problems of our society to the public sector to fix. We have huge amount of resource. I think we have a obligation, maybe even a moral obligation, to address the issues in front of us. And I think we need to encourage each other to stand up. I think we need to measure what's really happening. And then each of us can figure out that game plan, but we all need to take action, and it's our responsibility to do that.
So Dan, what I hear you saying, what I hear all of you saying is, for all you watching online, we're not trying to make CEOs social engineers of the universe. That's not what's going on here. That's not their job. But what we are saying is there's something they can do. If you can help people to vote, why wouldn't you want to do that? If you can help people get better health care, why wouldn't you do that? If you can lower their financial stress, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do things that are good for community, good for customers, good for workers, which are good for you? It's just enlightened self-interest. It makes perfect sense. And we need to knock off this ridiculous conversation that somehow you're penalized because you care and you have character. Please join me in thank you to three CEOs who care and who have character.
Thank you, brother.